Discovering Life's Meaning, a video series with meaning-centered psychologist Dr. Michael Winters.
Hello, my name is Dr. Michael Winters, and welcome to the Discovering Life's Meaning series of videos. Today we're going to talk about suffering, the attitudinal value of suffering and how that can lead to meaning. This is the most difficult to understand in a lot of ways. We can understand how experiencing something creates meaning, how doing something creates meaning, but how can pure suffering lead to meaning? Well, let me give you one of what I think is the best examples that I know of. There's a memoir and later a movie called The Diving Bell and the Butterfly. And that's the experience of Jean-Dominique Bauby, who was an editor of French Elle magazine and then suffered in his 40s a stroke. Had what they called shut-in syndrome, where his mind was perfect, but it could not communicate with his body. So he had conscious control over one eyelid. In order to facilitate communication, they made a poster and put the French alphabet on it, starting with the most commonly used letter and moving to the least commonly used letter. And the person trying to communicate with Bauby would point to the letters one at a time, and he would blink if that was the right letters, and then they'd notate it. So that was how he wrote this book-length memoir, one letter at a time, with someone going through each letter, the alphabet. Now, as you can imagine, he had incredible suffering. He had physical pain. He had no ability to control his environment. He talked about, there was some soccer game on television and he just wanted to sleep, but he couldn't ring the nurse's bell. He couldn't do anything unless someone came in and asked him what his need was. So this was very powerful. And yet, even in the face of all this, he was able to have memories and create for himself like he talked about food, and although he was fed food through a tube, in his mind he would remember and he would create this beautiful meal with the glaze was always just the perfect sheen and just the right flavor, and the crunch of the toast was just right, and everything in the meal just turned out beautifully. So even in this situation where he could not really create, where he could not experience the taste of the food, where most of his experience was suffering, he found a way to reach out and to share his experience and to be an inspiration and to be a hope for others. That is what we are talking about when we talk about finding meaning through suffering. Viktor Frankl said that this level, the attitude finding meaning through suffering, is superior to finding meaning through experience or through doing something, because even when those are not available, you can still have meaning through suffering. Now, how does that relate to less intense forms of suffering? Hopefully you're not in a place where your entire life is suffering. But think about grief. In grief, you can't really change the situation. You can't just think happy thoughts and bring back a deceased loved one, or bring back someone who's decided that they no longer want to be in relationship with you. But you can find a way to live through that, discover meaning, not happiness necessarily, but to be with your suffering and to find a way to discover meaning. That's what Viktor Frankl talked about as the highest level of meaning, finding meaning through suffering. In our next episode, we'll talk about putting these things together in more complex ways, and we'll move beyond kind of the theoretical and talk about some real specific ways that you can discover meaning in your life.